what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, October 10th, 2017, getting into the week here. A lot of stuff to talk about today, and let's get right on into it. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions here. So, look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's absolutely nothing. October 10th, over there in North Korea, came and went. No missile tests, no H-bomb tests, no H-bomb over the Pacific. Corporate media is laughing at it, saying, we made you look. We made you look. We got you all cranked up about nothing here. Right now, the focus does seem to be on Iran rather than North Korea. And I'm dreading what's going to happen over there. Now, a lot of stuff, they're still thrashing around with the Las Vegas shooting. They're pushing the gun control agenda. They're out there trying to basically reinforce the official story against an overwhelming tsunami of contradictory information. Dianne Feinstein actually came out with a rather interesting admission that no law would have stopped the Las Vegas gunman. And she's absolutely right. So why do we have these laws that only limit the law-abiding citizens? Criminals don't follow the gun laws. Terrorists don't follow the gun laws. Banning bump stocks isn't going to do anything. I've had no end of people sending me these improvised rapid-fire devices. One of them was little more than a piece of string. Somebody who wants to convert their gun to rapid fire, there are a myriad of ways to do it. So the guns aren't the problem. The behavior is the problem. The prescription antidepressants are the problem. The false flag attacks are the problem. That's what's going on here. But Feinstein is right. No law would have stopped the Las Vegas gunmen. Those who want to get guns, even the illegal ones, they can always get them. It's just another item the smugglers bring in across the border along with all the drugs. Now, over at the White House, actually more accurately the Congress, yet another collusion narrative has bit the big one. You remember where they were trying to make a big deal out of Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with this Russian lawyer, Veselnitskaya, and they were saying, see, that's where they were colluding. That's where they were working to put Donald Trump into the White House. Well, more emails have come on out, which basically confirm that the meeting was all about Veselnitskaya's year-long lobbying effort to kill the Magnitsky Act. That was it. That's all they talked about. So another big nothing burger, this time with cheese on it. It's still not going to help Donald Trump all that much. People aren't buying into the Russia collusion, Russia, rest of it, but they are noticing that Donald Trump is failing to keep many of his campaign promises, and I guess at my age I should just be used to the fact that politicians don't keep their promises, but especially the one about the war agenda. The others weren't that important. I'd like to see Hillary in jail, so would a lot of people, but this continued push toward World War III has me very, very concerned. So we're seeing this article out here in Sputnik News, all hat, no cattle. Trump is losing popularity in rural America, and that was his base for last year. That's where all the votes came from that overwhelmed Hillary's attempts to steal the election, because people felt that Trump was speaking to them directly. He wasn't using political rhetoric. He was talking plain in a language everybody could understand, and that's how he connected with those people. And that's in stark contrast to Hillary, who just flat out isn't likable. She comes across as convinced of her own superiority to everybody else around her. And nobody likes that kind of attitude. But Trump is losing his base over his failure to keep his campaign promises. And I'm afraid that unless he reverses course very quickly on the war agenda, on getting rid of Obamacare, on prosecuting Hillary, that he will be a single-term president. And it does look like he's going to finish his term because all of these allegations about collusion and everything, it's all falling apart. It's all total USDA choice bovine excrement, and everybody is seeing that. So let's get on to the story about Harvey Weinstein. Now that the floodgates are open, more and more allegations are coming out, including outright forcible rape. I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty details here, but he has now been accused of forcible rape, and just a lot of stuff is coming out. Apparently, he was actually caught in a police sting back in New York, and apparently he was able to get out of it with the cooperation of the New York Times. Oh, how could you even begin to think that Harvey Weinstein was capable of any of this stuff? And it's all piling on there. Hillary Clinton finally came out with a comment that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, which of course is key to the liberal platform. But again, a lot of liberal politicians are saying, now that you know what a scumbag this guy is, are you going to return those political donations? And they're all going, we'll think about it here. And apparently, and we're not talking about young, up-and-coming actresses who are trying to grab their a little bit of PR. We're talking people like Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie are saying that this guy was making these unwanted advances toward them. And Gwyneth and Angelina, it's not like they need any more publicity. They're at the top of their careers here right now. Interestingly enough, though, and showing that like protects like, fashion designer Donna Karan has come to Weinstein's defense, saying that his victims were asking for it. Oh, they were dressing sexy. They've got nobody to blame for themselves. And Weinstein and his wife, they're just wonderful, wonderful people here. This is like right out of last century, blame the victim. And it's how this group sticks together. And the exact same thing happened during the David Begelman scandal. And if you don't remember what that one was about, let me give you a quick little overview. 1 year, actor Cliff Robertson received a 1099 saying he'd been paid $10,000 from Columbia Pictures for working on one of Weinstein's projects, and he'd never gotten the money. So he complained basically first to the IRS, then to the police. They got hold of the canceled check and discovered, yes, the signature had been forged by David Begelman. And ultimately it turned out he'd been stealing from a lot of people who worked for him to a grand total of $65,000, which back then, that was a lot of money. And so immediately there were calls for him to be fired, for him to be prosecuted and sent to jail. And he was arrested and charged, but he got a wrist-slap sentence. And meanwhile, there was this huge firestorm where all these big producers in Hollywood, they all stood around him and they said, if you fire him, we'll all quit your studio. We'll take our production companies to other studios. We'll just abandon you. We'll take our film libraries with us, and that will be that. And it was a big stink, and Begelman was actually reinstated briefly. Then as more dirt came on out, he finally agreed to step on down for a rather generous severance package. So that's how it works. The idea of right or wrong, legal, morality, at that level in society, it isn't there. It's taking care of each other, taking care of the buddies, the cronies, and they don't care what it looks like to the rest of the world, because if you say anything about it, your career in Hollywood will be over. And a lot of these people who are coming forward now stayed silent through the years because they knew Weinstein can wreck careers. He can pick up a phone and that's it. You're gone from the town. And a lot of these young ladies have come forward to say that when they refused to go along with Weinstein's urgings, seductions, that all of a sudden they found they couldn't get work for a couple of years. So, I mean, that's the way the town actually does work here. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, Harvey Weinstein, he looks like a creepo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't look, I mean, yeah, you know what, they circle the wagons for the most part, but when you start getting more stories coming out, people are just going to be coming out with the stories now, and it's Hollywood fracturing. There's going to be, because it's a tribe, it's an oligarchy. Now you know how politics works because it's all the same. There's a lot of power. He has the power to call one call, you'll be working at McDonald's. I mean, You know, that guy, powerful people. You know, he's one of them, and that's how it works. Unfortunately,
it does
horrible,
up to a point. Up to a point, you can cross a line, like Roman Polanski and his little situation where he can't ever come back to this country. When it goes public, when the public is aware of it, when it threatens to harm the box office, that's when everybody splits. And they're going to turn on him. And Weinstein's going to realize that most of the people he thought were his friends were acting like his friends because they wanted to go on working in Hollywood and be close to the big productions. But he's going to find out who his true friends are right now. I remember something I saw when I was working at 20th Century Fox, and I was working on a TV movie, and this executive in charge of production just calmly waltzes on in and tells our producer that he needs to bury $20,000 in our budget. And if the producer doesn't go along with it, he's going to pull the plug, say the production's over. And so they padded our production budget for an additional $20,000, and this guy just walked off the lot with $20,000 cash in his pocket. Non-traceable, non-taxable. That kind of stuff really does go on all the time. And again, you know, if you mention it outside to the outside world, you're finished. And now that I'm no longer interested in working in the industry, I can talk about a lot of this stuff that I saw over there.
I really feel bad for Meryl Streep though, because her god's a pervert. You did see her when she said he's a god? Yeah,
yes.
One of the Oscars, right? He's a god. He's all, and they knew like. Hey, did you see the story with with Matt Damon? Did you talk about that? Matt Damon and Russell Crowe, how they...
I did. They came to his defense when he was dealing with a possible prosecution before.
But they can't. But supposedly they got in touch with people in the New York Times to whitewash the story.
Yes,
to get rid of it,
they did.
To bury it.
Yep.
See, this is our heroes on TV. Some heroes, huh?
Yep.
You know? Hey, Mike, I want to talk about Donald Trump. I voted for him. I'm a Democrat. Well, I'm an independent, really. But Mike, this is the only two choices we had. This is how sad and decadent this country has become. We had Trump and Hillary. That's what we got. We got bottom of the barrel scrapings left. This is it. This is it.
Well, again, you know? as I keep saying here, picking the lesser of two evils is still evil, and it's a stupid way to run a country.
It is, and that's why, hey, did you see the GDP forecast by IMF? We're only 2%, which is probably like 0.2%, and China's 7%. Now, add that up every year. China's on the rise, and they're the next superpower, because just look at the GDP.
Yeah, well, China makes products. China makes products people want to buy. U.S. manufacturing has been in decline for 30 years. Our software is just crud, as you can tell from all the problems we're having with Skype right now, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The U.S. has been trying to grow its economy by forcing the rest of the world to use our currency for a small fee, and it's not working anymore.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Now, I cannot believe this ridiculous NFL kneeling, standing, sitting thing is going on still. They're milking it out there. I got to tell you, the last time I saw this many Cowboys on their knees was Brokeback Mountain. And I'm kind of sick of it. But apparently the NFL has now changed their policy on players standing for the national anthem by giving teams the incentive and power to punish the protesters. Now, it's not really a change of policy because the NFL rules all along have said when the anthem is playing, you will stand at attention and face the flag. So basically the NFL is now adding enforcement authority to that rule, saying if you don't, your pay is going to be docked, you're going to be out of the game, because they're losing money hand over fist over this thing. Now, that being said, you have to be careful of some of the information that's floating around the net. There is a photo, supposedly, of Michael Bennett burning the U.S. flag in the locker room. It's making the rounds on social media. It is a fake. It's photoshopped. And somebody found the original photo of them celebrating in the locker room, and you can tell it's exactly the same. Somebody added that burning flag to try and fan the situation up. So a lot of deception going on out there, trying to keep up the confusion. But again, for that NFL thing, I think it's gone on way too long. It's become a caricature of itself. So let's talk about what's going on in the various war zones. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm very, very concerned over the leaks that Donald Trump is going to refuse to certify the Iran nuclear deal. And apparently Prime Minister Theresa May made a point of telling Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Britain remains firmly committed to the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran, which tells us that Theresa May knows who's really in charge of the U.S. government. Pretty much everybody who signed that agreement wants to stick with it, so they're at odds with the U.S. government, and they're hoping they can convince Iran to abide by the deal even if the U.S. pulls on out and starts throwing more sanctions on there. Now, the only thing these other countries can offer to do is to increase economic ties with Iran so that Iran can weather whatever U.S. sanctions there are, which means that all the U.S. sanctions are going to do is cut the United States off from much of the economy of Iran and even Europe as well. Now, the UN IAEA chief, Amano, once again confirmed Iran is complying with the nuclear deal. And if there's anybody not living up to the spirit of the agreement, folks, it's the United States. Because their half of the deal was get rid of the sanctions. Didn't happen. They added more. So it's the U.S. that's in violation of the spirit of the P5+1 deal. Now, former UN weapons inspector Hans Blix is saying that canceling the Iran deal is an affront to the United Nations, and he's drawing a parallel with what happened with the 2003 invasion of Iraq, where all the UN weapons inspectors said, no, there are no nuclear weapons, and the U.S. said, well, we know they're there because we saw it in Miss Cleo's crystal ball, and went ahead and destroyed Iraq and imposed a puppet regime. But the IAEA and the rest of the world leaders are rejecting all these U.S. claims on the Iran nuclear deal. And they unanimously have thrown their weight behind the P5+1 deal. And saying the U.S. just can't unilaterally destroy this deal because Donald Trump wants to one-up President Obama, former President Obama, and because the U.S. is still under the control of Israel, which wants Iran smashed. And that's what makes it really interesting about Theresa May going to Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel wasn't part of the original P5+1. Technically, they have no say in this deal at all. But if they keep going in this direction, there will be a crisis. Iran has already signaled that they will view the U.S. withdrawal from the agreement as basically abrogating the entire agreement, and they're ready to go back to start working on nuclear weapons, emboldened by the fact that North Korea is apparently making huge success there. Meanwhile, over in the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Lavrov is informing the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson Moscow is demanding the return of its diplomatic properties that were illegally seized by the United States, warning of legal consequences and possible retaliation. Remember when the U.S. went on in and seized all these diplomatic properties and said, we're pretty darn sure that there's something bad going on here, and so we're just going to seize these properties and we're going to kick the Russians out of it. And that was a horrible breach of diplomatic protocol at the international level. So Lavrov wants those properties back, and if not, they may start grabbing U.S. diplomatic properties in Russia. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with a phone call after these few words. Erica, welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I just wanted to start out and add on to what Dustin just said about the miserable, horrible, bottom-feeding choices that we have, and point out that going back beyond just the last election, by the way, Obama let his daughter intern under this pig, Harvey Weinstein. Think about that. Then think back to the last election when we had Obama versus when Mitt Romney came to town.
Yes.
And then the one before that between Obama and Songbird McCain.
Yes.
And then, of course, the one before, going back to Bill Clinton, who's every bit as big or bigger a sexual predator than Harvey Weinstein ever was.
Yes.
Only he had the FBI and the Secret Service to bully people in the IRS
and his wife.
Silence.
And his wife. I mean,
and
Hillary Clinton led the bimbo eruption squad.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's who going back 20 years, and of course, add into that, drug dealing frat boy, stupid idiot, George Bush, and then his father, the CIA idiot who ran Contra. And think what losers we've had. And think who owns this country. And then I just wanted to say one more thing, and that is, actually two more things. I had a conversation today with a friend of mine who was talking about the divide, how divided this country is, and one of the biggest divisions, Mike, you just talked about it in your thing for RBN, is the people who know and the people who don't know, the people who are still attached to the matrix and still believe everything that people say, and the people who finally have broken loose and say, oh, what the hell, this country is just screwed, and don't believe anything, which is, of course, where I'm at, and I know it's where you're at, too. But what a divide that is, Mike, really.
It is a tremendous divide, but again, part of the problem is we're all raised to want to see ourselves as good people, as heroic people. We want to be like those heroes we see on the movies and TV shows where we'll take a stand against injustice. But the reality is when you actually see evidence that your government has gone wrong, you have to make a very, very serious choice. Are you going to try and do something about it, which entails risks to life, liberty, property, your family, or are you going to just stay quiet and go along with it? And people who stay quiet and go along with it, they have to surrender that image of being courageous and noble and heroic. And most people don't want to do that. So what they'll do is they'll gratefully accept any propaganda that is passed on down, where they can go on thinking, I'm a good person, I would take up the cause of justice against a corrupt government. I just don't see a reason to do it right now. And they cling to that desperately and gratefully so that they can sleep at night and still think that they're patriots and good human beings. Claire and I have a friend, or maybe at this point it's had a friend, who's very liberal. And during last year's campaign, when we were talking about Hillary's past, it was just like her eyes would glaze on over. And it used to be that liberals really did represent the knowledgeable, intellectual elites. But over time, people who are insecure about their intellect and their smarts, all they have to do is wear the label liberal, and then it's sort of presumed that they have high IQs and a broad-based knowledge. That certainly wasn't the case in dealing with this friend. In fact, if anything, she seemed like she was secure in her lack of knowledge. Her attitude was if she hadn't heard it, if she hadn't seen it, it couldn't be real, and she wasn't interested. And so she definitely drank the Hillary Clinton Kool-Aid, and I'm sure Trump's victory in the election was an absolute devastation to her. But there is a lot, unfortunately, of denial and self-delusion still in the American people, and we need to break through that, because nothing's going to change in this country until the American people are ready to confront head-on the true nature of what the government has become.
Orwell said it, Mike. I know you've said it before, paraphrasing him. Ignorance is bliss. and that's where that's their refuge, right? But
it didn't work for the Germans in World War II. Hey, stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after the commercial. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles and how ignorance is bliss. But again, remember that good German phenomenon during the Nazi era in Germany, where the German people were convinced that if they just stayed quiet, did what they were supposed to do, did the Sieg Heil, wore the pins and everything, nothing bad would happen to them. And it turned out quite the opposite. In failing to stand up to a government that was clearly headed in a disastrous direction, the German people basically lost everything at the end of the war. And the same thing is going to happen to Americans for failing to stand up to a corrupted government. We're headed for disaster. We're heading off the edge of a cliff here.
Well, Mike, I wanted to make the comment, and it's kind of related here to what you just said, and that is that this whole thing with them now going to, who was it that just went to, talked with Israel about the P5+1?
Theresa May?
I'm sorry, Theresa May, which of course Israel had nothing to do, of course, ostensibly with the P5+1, but everybody knows, including Theresa May and every other world leader and signatory of the P5+1, including Iran, knows that Israel runs our foreign policy.
Yes.
Israel's behind the whole thing, and Israel is behind the war if we go to war. It's just another manifestation of how everyone in the world recognizes who is the wagging the dog here.
Yes.
But again, this is a good German thing here too. When people, see that that we're getting into all these wars, that for Israel, that we're losing our Bill of Rights, our freedom of speech and the First Amendment because of Israel and their supporters, that there's all this character assassination, that guys like Harvey Weinstein and Haim Saban and Sheldon Adelson and all these long lists of guys operate. And by the way, the New York Times, which I just saw your thing that you posted on with Project Veritas, which is incredibly interesting. If people with blinders on, they're like the good Germans. We're going to be in another world war, and they will have been like the Germans.
Yes, unfortunately, you're right. And the good Germans died right alongside the bad Germans. Yeah.
Well, listen, I know there's other callers and all that, Mike. Are you going to get into the Veritas thing? Because that was fascinating to me.
I don't know that I'm going to get into it until much later in the show. I actually haven't watched it all the way through myself because I was doing show prep here. But anyway, Peter, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to James in Atlanta. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I want to ask two questions about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
Do you know if he was forced, any people were forced to return any money he gave, or do you think that the stuff going on with Weinstein may make people refocus on him again? And can you explain that case for people that may not know what we're talking about?
Well, Jeff Epstein is another individual with rather excessive sexual habits, which got him into trouble when he was down there in Florida, which is why now he's got himself his own little island out in the Caribbean. And he was kind of open about it. He called his private airplane, I think it was the Lolita Express, and a lot of elites would hang out with him because there was a lot of things going on that they wanted to take advantage of, and it was a big stink that Epstein had been hiring girls, some of them underage, to provide nude massages to his guests, which included a lot of top politicians, a lot of top businessmen. One member of the royal family got caught up in this whole scandal. The part that always bothered me about that is that these individuals who went down and took advantage of this little pleasure palace down there in the Caribbean, or even the house in Florida, they had to know there were going to be cameras and microphones, and yet they went ahead and engaged in this behavior anyway, which strikes me as the height of stupidity. But Epstein was able to avoid excessive punishment for what he did. He got kind of a wrist slap given the severity of his crimes. But again, it's almost like there's this desire for revenge on the rest of the world, which often expresses itself sexually. And there was an article that we linked to this morning that basically came on out and said that, a lot of this excessive sexual aggression is a manifestation of the refusal to integrate into a society. And maybe it's a Middle Eastern thing, because we're seeing the same kind of behavior with the refugees pouring into Europe. The only difference is they don't have legions of lawyers and friendly newspapers to keep them out of jail.
Was he a big donor?
Oh, yes. Big donor, huge lobbyist.
And nobody gave that money back?
No, they didn't, and I doubt anybody will give Weinstein his money back either.
Okay, well, thanks for that, and hope you have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Interestingly enough, remember I was drawing a parallel between Weinstein and the Begelman scandal. Apparently, Weinstein has actually sent out communiques to all the media and all of his friends in the Hollywood studios saying, if you'll stand around me, I'll be okay. He's literally asking for them to do for him what previous generation did for Begelman. Just stand around. We don't care what he did. If you try and punish him or fire him, we will simply quit. So, anyway, back to the phones. Jeff on Maui. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I hate to keep going back to this Vegas shooter thing.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, I mean, but I wrapped it up in my mind last night. I just wanted to share it with somebody. So we already know it was a false flag or whatever, and we don't, we may not know exactly who this Paddock was or what it is, and we don't know what he was doing, drilling holes and all this stuff. And it's just the minutia machine that the press and the FBI is going to leak out little by little to keep us little conspiracy nuts occupied. But what I did last night is close the chapter on it to some degree in my mind.
Yeah.
Was, and why? Why did this happen? And what I think is this is a deep FBI operation that is basically telling Trump that we're gonna do whatever we want. Now, why would you pick a casino to do this? Well, because Trump owns casinos. So, I mean, if you've ever been around somebody who owns a franchise or anything like that, if you're not going to hit them directly, hit another casino. So they pick a casino, they do this Oklahoma City type handling thing, and this, remember, the FBI is investigating Trump. So I think it's very clear when you look at the big picture of it. This is the FBI running one of their, Oklahoma City type whatever ops, and they're doing it to basically make a statement to Trump and to the rest of the world, or citizens of the United States or whatever, that we're going to do what we want.
Well, I think that's a little grandiose, and again, I'm a big fan of Occam's razor. This appears to have been an op to push the gun grabber agenda, because look at all the laws that were getting ready to be passed that were going to loosen up restrictions on firearms. They were basically going to make concealed carry permits national. They were talking about taking the transfer tax off of suppressors for hunters. All kinds of really good things for the shooting sports enthusiast, and it had to be stopped. And remember, we saw the same thing in Columbine. Columbine, or rather the state that Columbine was in, was on the verge of passing a very gun owner-friendly concealed carry law. And then Columbine happened, and of course, in the fury of the moment, they canceled it. And Paul Ryan's already buckled under to the gun grabbers and pulled that legislation off the table, the one that was going to allow hunters to have flash suppressors to protect their eyesight. And it's off the table. And that appears to be the primary reason that this thing was done. I think they chose a casino simply to make the point that, they're going to spread these things out. They've done schools, they've done shopping malls, let's do a casino now. And probably the idea of firing into that contained crowd at that concert guaranteed there'd be a high body count. And I think that was primarily the reason that they chose that. If they were going to send a message to Donald Trump, they would have used one of his casinos and made it look like they were incompetent and negligent. And that would really harm the Trump casino's business.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The underlying, there's always a thread with these, is that the gun grabbing, which is always the thread of communism and socialism or liberal Jewish intellectual Marxism, is you disarm people. I mean, that's fundamental to anything, any op. That's built into the DNA of any op. They're always going to have that as part of the situation. But what I'm saying is they pick a casino, like you said, they had a milieu of places they could have done.
Mm-hmm.
They picked a casino and picked white people, and they picked a white shooter. So that's all. You have a matrix of choices. It's like going to Subway. It's like Subway sandwiches of terror. Of course you're going to walk out of there with your Subway sandwich, which is the gun grabbing agenda. But how are you going to flavor it this time? And to me, the way this thing packages up is there's a brethren of casino owners. Now, Trump may or may not like all the other casino owners, but at the end of the day, they're all casino owners.
Yes.
And it would have been just over the top. It would have done a Trump casino. That would have ignited the quote base of Trump. That would have just been over the top. It's odd. The story doesn't hold up, right? So it's always the same people that see through this thing right off the bat. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that they put the flavor together to make it this is a Trump burger, not just
okay.
Well, gun grabbing with the
I understand what you're saying here. I think you're reading more into it than is really there. I think the agenda was pure and simply the gun grab, and if they're trying to send a message by, about, or for Donald Trump, it is too subtle to be noticed here. So we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. I want to get on back to the news here, especially the war zones, okay? And more entities are coming on out and saying, look, it's time to stop pretending. The U.S. is not, in fact, fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. They are helping them and using them as proxies, and they're trying to keep this fight going while figuring out some way to turn it around and get back into Damascus and take down Assad. So, story coming out of Press TV, U.S. supplying munitions to Daesh and Nusra terrorists. This is from a top general in Syria. And yesterday, of course, we had the leader of Hezbollah was saying exactly the same thing. And the Syrian government has now released more footage, more video of Western weapons seized from the terrorists. And we're not talking about the moderate opposition that the U.S. likes to say, yeah, we're helping them, but we're not really supporting the terrorists. These are the hardcore terrorists. And they have got all these U.S. manufactured weapons, which have never been fired and only dropped once. Another story coming out of Mir News, basically voicing the concerns that we've heard over the last couple of weeks coming from both Syria and Iraq, that what the U.S. is trying to do is create a second Israel in eastern Syria, the next step along the path to Eretz Israel. And this is why Theresa May is calling Netanyahu. Why go through Trump? She knows who the boss is. And, of course, the region is very concerned because they have enough trouble with the one Israel they've already got. They don't need another one there. So let's get on back to our wonderful weapons systems and its star attraction, the F-35. We've been talking about all the problems that it has suffered. And there's just flat-out design flaws. It's like most modern American weapons. It's very expensive. It is bloated with all kinds of whiz-bang gizmos, which still don't work. They still don't have the software for the onboard cannon. And they're compensating for it by having a belly-mounted pod with a separate gun, which adds to the weight, reduces speed and maneuverability. But one of the countries purchasing the F-35, when it finally actually starts working in military mode, is Israel. They're starting to have some serious doubts about this, whether it's ever going to work again, or if it's ever going to work properly. Remember, they've had it up there in dogfights with 70s vintage fighters. F-15s, F-14s, F-18s. It can't dogfight. It's overly dependent on its missiles and onboard electronics, which was the tactical mistake they made with the F-4 Phantom in Vietnam. Didn't even have an onboard cannon. We'll get them with the missiles. And it didn't really work out, which is why they added a G-pod, a gun pod to the F-4 and started up the Top Gun School to train pilots for aerial combat, to get on out there, mix up the furball, and shoot the other guy down. And basically, Israel is saying that the aircraft is inherently flawed. And we've gone down the list of problems before. Insulation in the wing tanks breaks off, gets sucked into the engine, engine blows up. Can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain, can't fly near lightning. Software for the cannon still not available. The so-called virtual helmet, the glass cockpit, is still not fusing the view from all the cameras. The networked radar system is still unable to effectively distinguish how many targets are out there. But with the shared information from multiple aircraft, can't tell if they're seeing 4 aircraft or the same aircraft 4 times around. And it's not just Israel. Even Great Britain is starting to clear their throats and say this could be a huge embarrassment for the Ministry of Defense. I mean, these aircraft are supposed to come into service in less than 3 years. But there are serious concerns about the software. And those concerns are valid because the state of the art of American software development is crud. Look at Skype. Look at Windows 10. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go right back to the phones. James in Texas. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, can you hear me okay, Mike?
I hear you fine.
Yes. I would like to tie your last 3 topics together, if I could. The phone call about the Vegas shooting and your last 2 stories about Israel being the boss and the F-35.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Israel is the boss because I don't know if you read the story that the Kurdish oil now in northern Iraq, now Israel is buying it. And with the Vegas thing, James Murray, he's a member of Trump's National Infrastructure Advisory.
Mm-hmm.
He's also CEO of the MGM Resort International, and they own the Maryland Bay.
Okay.
So that's your connection right there. And then the F-35, it does work. That's why Israel got it, because they just gave it to Russia. Russia has billions of arms deals with Israel. So does China. And they're just giving that stuff away. They're not even really selling it. They're just giving it away. And there's a reason why Russia wants it, because it's mint. There's a reason why it costs $1 billion, because it's mint. It works. It might not be all the way.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you. It costs that much money because of cost plus and the military-industrial complex being greedy. But spending a lot of money on a weapons system doesn't mean it necessarily works. Look at the Zumwalt stealth destroyer or the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. They're now saying that those may never actually be usable in real combat, and they were very expensive. I don't mention that Russia's curiosity about the F-35 is any more than figuring out how its weapon systems work to devise a defense, but I can't see them copying it when their frontline fighters are already outperforming it.
Yeah, but that's what you're saying. The weapon system, that's what they want. That's what works. That's what the money was put into. They like the weapon system.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The cannon doesn't even have its software yet. Okay? Stop saying that the F-35 works. It's a boondoggle.
If you work on it for cheap, they got it for cheap from Israel. That's what I'm saying. They got this weaponry that we spent a lot of money researching. They got it for a couple of $100,000s, while we, the taxpayers, spent billions.
Okay, James.
Israel could make money.
James, it doesn't matter how much money the U.S. government spent developing the F-35. What they came up with was a piece of junk, and nobody's going to copy it, no matter how cheap they're getting it. And like I said, Russia's current frontline aviation warplanes already outperform the F-35. And probably it's going to be vulnerable to Russia's latest development in electronic warfare. They've clearly had some kind of a breakthrough there to be able to generate massive amounts of UHF radiation from a very small device. Okay, we got to take a break.
That's what Israel makes all its money, right?
Okay, thank you. We're going to let you go and do a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, interestingly enough, Al Jazeera did a documentary on the Israel lobby in Great Britain. And, of course, all the pro-Israel groups, the Israel lobby itself, were complaining, it's anti-Semitic, it's going to incite hatred of the Jews, it's this, it's that. And they tried to file a complaint to keep it from being broadcast. And apparently Ofcom ruled that the 4-part investigation, The Lobby, was factually accurate, correctly observed rules on fairness, impartiality, and privacy, and was not anti-Semitic. And it was okay for it to be broadcast. Well, following that, Al Jazeera is now saying they're going to do another documentary about the Israel lobby here in the United States of America. And apparently it's already in production because Al Jazeera confirmed they got one of their reporters inside a pro-Israel group here in the United States of America. So we're going to see some sparks flying over that one. All right, let's take another phone call. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, the subject of peace versus war you were talking about on Trump. I remember one time, a long time ago, I heard Casper Weinberger on a radio show, and he said it's hard to go to war in a democratic country because the people are always against war.
Yes.
And that really hit me because, that's the whole thing. You're not supposed to do what the people don't want, but he was looking at it as just an obstacle that we have to go around because we have to have war. But as far as Trump, he won. He beat his biggest challenger that he had to knock out of the ring right away was Jeb Bush. And the way he did that was to just come right out against the Iraq war and say it was a total catastrophe, which was true. But for him to do that, it's totally separated him from every other of the 13 candidates they had there. And that's how he got the nomination. And after he got the nomination, it was pretty easy. It wasn't that hard for him to beat Hillary Clinton because she's such an atrocious person.
Well, I disagree with you a little bit about Jeb Bush. Yes, Trump was right to go after him on the issue of the Iraq War because the Bush name carries a lot of baggage, almost as much as the Clintons do. But I think looking at Jeb Bush, the reason he did so miserably, despite all the support that he was getting, is he could never get that deer in the headlight look off his face. And he looked like he was out of his depth. He couldn't connect with the audience. He always looked like he was afraid the audience was going to storm the stage and tar and feather him. And so he didn't come across as a strong leader. He came across as another Nepet, another kid who's aiming for a hereditary throne. And Americans generally don't respond to the idea of inherited thrones, even going back to Roosevelt's time. They were talking about, we'd already had a Roosevelt as president. We didn't need another one. And after George W. Bush, a lot of people were saying we don't need another Bush in the White House.
Right, but he had the support of the establishment, the Republican establishment. But anyway, as you're talking about the Russian weapons, they've been good at weapons a long time. A lot of people Americans don't remember that actually the Russians were the ones that primarily beat the Germans in World War II. And the way they did it, they had at the beginning of the war, their tanks were not as good as the Germans, but it's been said that by the end of the war, that the Russian tanks were better than the Germans.
Well, the Russians, and for that matter, the Chinese, they tend to want simple, easy to use, easy to repair, easy to maintain weapons. They're not junked up the way the American systems are. I remember many years ago when I was at Edwards, getting to actually sit in the cockpit of an F-104. And just, I mean, dials and buttons and switches everywhere. In fact, there were some that you'd have to literally reach around the back of the seat to get it all turned on. And fortunately, there was an attempt at simplification of the cockpits starting in the 1980s. But again, this idea of a multi-role platform, it's trying to be all things to everybody, and it's not very good at any one of them. And Russia and China, they basically say, this is going to be a fighter, this one's going to be an interceptor, this is going to be a ground attack aircraft, and they design for that particular mission in mind, and they come up with very effective weapons platforms at a reasonable cost. They get a lot of bang for their buck. And part of that has to do with the attitude. They're there to make weapons as opposed to the military-industrial complex, which is there to make money. And the bigger and more bloated and more junked up they can make the weapons, the more money they're going to make off of them under the cost-plus contracts.
Yeah, Smedley Butler was right.
Yes, he was.
It's a racket.
He absolutely. Well, he was talking more about the use of the military to support corporate interests in other countries. That in his entire career in the Marines, he never once fought for the freedom of anybody. He never fought to defend the United States of America. It was always going on into a country and protecting the interests of this oil company or this agricultural company, or overthrowing a government that was standing in the way of some other corporate development.
Well, he talked about war profiteering a lot, too, in that book. All these different companies. He quoted exactly how much profit every one of these, the meatpacking industry and such, they all made. Okay, I'm going to let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. There are two speeches by President Eisenhower that you need to look at. The first is his farewell address, where he talks about the military-industrial complex, and he sounds the warning that it will get out of control. And it'll just become this monster that devours all the wealth of the nation to feed itself. And its lust for more war and more bloodshed. And paired with that is another one called the Cross of Iron speech, where he talks about what war really costs in down-to-earth terms that the American people can really understand. And I think his wisdom came from the fact that he had actually been through a war. And one of the things that we need to be very conscious of is that for the most part, our current political leadership, our current elected leaders, very few of them have actually seen the horrors of war up front. And to them it's an abstraction. It's a video game. We've got buttons, we'll push buttons, and we'll drone strike this and we'll bomb that. And they don't really understand what war feels like up close and personal. Eisenhower did, and that's why he turned out, despite being the commander-in-chief of the European forces in World War II, he turned out to be one of the most anti-war presidents we've had in our history, because he knows what it's really like for those people who are sent into that war. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economic news, because it's not looking good. Apparently, over in New York, foreclosures are way, way up. They've surged 79%. This is the most since 2009, when New York was still reeling from the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. And so apparently owners are trying to leverage up in the absence of real buyers, because there's actually a lot of people are leaving the urban areas. They're moving out into the country. They want that more relaxed lifestyle, and they're beginning to see the urban areas grow in crime, and a lot of it is caused by the immigration refugee problem. And they're seeing cities like Chicago, where it's just clearly very dangerous to walk down the street. Now, if you are on an Obamacare plan down there in the state of Florida, you'd better sit down for this next one, because The health insurers in Florida have requested premium rate hikes as high as 71%. They got you now. They've absolutely got you. Mandate you will buy these insurance policies. You're not allowed to go to these other insurance policies or not have insurance, or the IRS is going to come get you. And now they just crank up the premiums every year, year after year, 20, 40, 60, now 71%. It's all about looting and plundering the American people. It's got very little to do with your health because of those sky-high deductibles. All right, let's take a phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I have two things. The first is you're talking about the F-35.
Yes.
And they even hit the name. That should be FT, Fighter Bomber 35, because that designation would indicate it's intended as a multi-role platform.
Okay, you're a little garbled. Can you move your mouth just a little bit closer to the phone?
Okay, that's very rare. I'm on my actual phone itself as opposed to a Bluetooth, so it should be pretty good. It's usually pretty good. Do you remember the scene in the movie Armageddon where Bruce Willis is unbolting things from the moon rover and saying, "What is this?" and like throwing it out, like taking stuff off it? And that's exactly what Israel does with our cigarette. They like start unbolting stuff and say, "Well, this is helmet. Get this out of here," And then they make them lighter, faster, and work better.
Well, it's like it's like what they did for Doolittle's Raiders to get those B-25s light enough to get off a carrier. They just stripped them on down there, and it does make a lot of sense for them to do that. But again, if the fundamental design of the vehicle is flawed, you're going to have to do some major work on it. Now, Israel's willing to do that because, again, going back to the Pentagon Wars, one of the interesting things revealed in the book and mentioned briefly in the movie is that Israel was buying the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle from the United States, but only with modifications that would actually make it safe to use. And of course, this colonel...
Right.
Okay, this colonel who was trying to get the Defense Department to own up to the fact that their version of the Bradley fighting vehicle was just this costly boondoggle, he couldn't get anybody to listen. He said, "Why don't you do with it what the Israelis are doing? They're making it a working platform. Why are we going this way?" Well, it's more money, it's more expensive. And it was a disaster, something like, $15 billion in development costs alone.
Well, same thing with the F-15. They get a great version of the F-15. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up was now for something completely different. The recent California legislation about reducing the penalty for deliberate transmission of HIV from a felony to a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And allowing for the donation of HIV-infected blood. Well, when you ask me who benefits, follow the money question about this, the state will benefit greatly because for every felon, everyone who's convicted of a felony and is incarcerated, they then have to take care of their health care costs.
Mm-hmm.
So this means if there's just a misdemeanor and they're not in prison, that's going to cut their inmate health care costs for the state.
I don't know how common a problem this really is. My gut is telling me it's not big enough to make a serious impact on the cost of the private prisons. And remember, the private prison corporations, you have to have a certain number of prisoners in there or you're assessed a penalty. Given that the same politician also introduced legislation to allow certain classes of sex offenders to be taken off the sex offender registry, I have a tendency to think that this is more about liberal politics than it is economics.
Well, yeah, that may be correct. It's unconscionable either way, of course. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and for those private prisons, they want people with good communication skills to work their boiler room operations for their call centers and their manufacturing operations and stuff like that. They want cheap labor, slave labor. Is what they're looking to.
Yeah, it's almost like some of these judges. The judges have been caught accepting money from these private prison corporations to literally deliver people of needed skills. And basically we have slave labor camps just like the Nazis did.
Yep, that's something that is, I think the word fascism is greatly overtouted, but in that case, certainly applies. All right, Mike, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news here. Now, over in Great Britain, their BAE systems seem to have hit a little bit of a snag. Apparently, they're weapons manufacturers, and their sales are slowing down. And they're getting ready to cut more than 1,000 jobs this week. And the company's new chief executive, Charles Woodburn, has been considering trimming the workforce across all BAE facilities. The first wave of firings is expected to mostly affect the company's Wharton plant in Preston, Lancashire. Up in Canada, Sears has thrown in the towel. They're in bankruptcy. They're going for total liquidation. They're waiting for the judge's approval, the bankruptcy court approval, and if it's approved, the liquidation sales are going to begin on the 19th and will run for 10 to 14 weeks or until the stores are empty. So, bad way to start the holiday shopping season. Speaking of shopping seasons, Hollywood box office not doing very good. Now, apparently the remake of It did fairly well, but there were a lot of hopes on this sequel to Blade Runner 2049, and it cost $150 million to make. And the rule of thumb in Hollywood is to break even after distribution and PR costs, a movie has to take in 2.5 times its original production cost at the box office / DVD Blu-ray sales. We're talking almost $500 million here. And apparently 2049 grossed only $31.5 million in its opening weekend, and that has sent shockwaves throughout the various studios that partnered to make this. Now, the film did a little better internationally, taking in $50 million in overseas ticket sales over the weekend. But it's a little bit of a disappointment there. But again, I haven't seen the film yet. I do intend to see it. I love the original one. I'm concerned that part of the problem may be that the last couple of films Harrison Ford has done, his heart hasn't seemed to be in it, like Ender's Game. And we'll see what happens with the film. And where they go with it. And the original storyline of the original film was based on a science fiction novel, Do Cyborgs Dream of Electric Sheep? And it was a very good story, and it had a lot of good points to it. Kind of hard to follow up on that, especially when you're talking about all these years later, and there's another threat from the replicants. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Now, Sarah Silverman, who's been out there at the forefront of liberal screed, came out with a new song called I Love You, America, in which it features Sarah Silverman ranting about white privilege and Americans voting against their best interests. Gee, I wonder where she got that idea. The good news is this song has crashed and burned. Nobody wants to hear it. We're all sick and tired of the liberal crybabies, the snowflakes. They need to understand, no, the world does not revolve around liberalism. There are other things out here that we prefer to pay attention to. And I think Sarah Silverman has succeeded in angering a lot of people. I think she's succeeded in sabotaging much of her original base. You go to a comedian to be entertained, not to be lectured at. We're seeing the same thing in the late night shows with all these so-called comedians who have turned their programs away from let's have a good time to let's all dogpile on Donald Trump. And that's why people are turning him off. Remember Busby Berkeley? What a huge success he had. At the height of the Depression, he was making these movies that were just total fantasies, escapism. And people just love to see them. They're still considered classics. That's what people go to entertainment for, to escape what's going on in their lives. The poverty, the joblessness, the hunger, the wars. They don't go to the movies and TV shows to just have more real life rubbed into their faces. Anybody who understands films and entertainment already knows that. Apparently Sarah Silverman did not. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to head back to the phone lines here. Michael in Los Angeles. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today? Michael, are you there?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Hey, Mike. Aloha, Mike. I just want to make a quick comment about Harvey Pigstein. You see what I did there?
Yes.
This guy is unbelievable. All these morons, all these people in the United States supporting this Hollywood machine. I'm so sick of it. Stop supporting these Jews, these communist liberal bastards. I'm so sick of them, Mike. These guys are all perverts, and they need to be trialed. Why isn't there any prosecution against them? I'm totally sick of it, man. It's just unbelievable.
Well, don't sugarcoat it like that. Just tell us how you really feel. But as I understand it, he's open to at least one charge of forcible rape. And, he's going to use every bit of power and influence he has to get out of it. And maybe he'll get out of it because, unfortunately, in Hollywood, people get away with stuff. People have gotten away with murder. And that's a sad reality of life in Tinseltown.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so sick of these globalists, if you want to call them that. Unbelievable. They just have so much power in the media, in politics, in news. It's unbelievable. In banks. Why aren't people doing anything about it? I mean, sure, more and more people are waking up, but is it enough? Will we be able to counteract and, peacefully resolve this? It's unbelievable.
Well, look at... Okay, calm down. Had way too much coffee this morning. Look at what happened in Catalonia. Look at what happened in Crimea, Kurdistan. Now we're hearing Bavaria wants an independence referendum. Yeah, I think the world is waking up to the globalist agenda, and they're starting to fight back. And it may lead to some war.
I hope South America wakes up.
Well, we're working on it. That's why I'm here. Okay,
Another thing, Mike. Another thing, I don't know if you're probably aware of this, but there's a guy named Maddox, some Armenian guy who ran the world's something greatest page or whatever. Last year he wrote a piece and attacked the alternate news, and there's a picture of you on there, and I listen to you every day, and you're just covering what's on the mainstream media. It's freaking ridiculous.
Well,
I don't know if you heard of that.
No, I don't, and I don't pay attention to that stuff. There's a lot of websites out there that are dissing me, and the corporate media disses me. The Washington Post was accusing me of being an arm of Russian propaganda not too long ago. But what I do here is basically look at what is in the corporate media, what is in the independent media, and I put it together with analysis. And that is really what my job primarily is helping to sort of peel through the noise and say, this is what this is really all about. Anyway, Michael, we're going to let you go and switch over to Joey in New Jersey. Aloha, Joey. I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind today?
Mike, I run a small limousine car service business in Jersey.
Okay.
And I promote you as the truth merchant.
Well, thank you very much.
And what I wanted to ask you, thank you. And what I wanted to ask you is, do you think Mr. Trump, has even read Smedley's book, JFK's writings, or Eisenhower's writings?
I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea. All I can say is, for some reason, he has surrounded himself with all these generals. He's taking his political advice from Israel, and as a result, we're heading into a new world war, which, frankly, I think this country is probably going to lose.
I agree with what you're saying, obviously. Unfortunately.
Yes.
But this man, I don't want to repeat what is assumed that Tillerson said, but I want to add that I think he's an idiot, an effing idiot.
Well, can you believe this nonsense where Trump and Tillerson are like, they're measuring their respective IQs? I mean, talk about childish behavior. And IQ isn't everything. IQ without knowledge and discipline is pretty much worthless. But, I mean, it's just childish. Joe, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Have a good day and good luck with your business. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, the Prime Minister of Hungary in recent weeks has really started standing up to Brussels and this refugee nonsense. And right now he's accusing the European Union's leadership of insulting behavior toward the member states, abusing its powers, while eating out of the hand of billionaire Open Borders campaigner George Soros. And sounds like 3 for 3 as far as I can tell. Now, France has waded on into the Catalonia dispute, warning against a unilateral independence declaration. Well, there really isn't any other kind. No ruler in history has said to a region, you just break off and go your own way. It doesn't happen. All declarations of independence are unilateral. Ours certainly was. Funny how France was on our side when we had a Declaration of Independence. The globalists are scared. They're very, very scared here. Now, interesting little development as they talk more and more about the Brexit. There is a new movement within the British government. They're starting to talk about, well, if we're not going to be part of the European Union, maybe we should join the North American Union, which would be kind of interesting on two sides of the Atlantic. But the idea here is not to let Britain be an independent sovereign nation anymore. Get it into a union somewhere, anywhere. And stop the dissolution of the global empire. And like I said, I think the globalists are getting desperate. They're realizing people are digging their feet in on this, their heels in on this stuff. Now, as you know, Governor Moonbeam out in California has signed a bill declaring California to be a sanctuary state. And interestingly enough, the California sheriffs are approaching Congress to stop this because they understand what the real costs of illegal immigration has imposed on California. The crime in the communities, the detriment. And so a group of representing the best interest of sheriffs is calling on Congress to stop it and say we have to have reasonable border control. I mean, they're dealing with like MS-13 and other gangs out there in California. It's really made the place unlivable. But from the point of view of the liberals, hey, they're all going to be Democratic voters. We're going to bring them on in. We're going to give them all kinds of free stuff. We'll make the Republicans pay for it, and then they'll vote for us. And from the intensity that they're still doing it, it sounds like they're going to count on the illegal immigrant vote next year and probably 2020 as well. And that's why I am really disappointed that President Trump's Commission on Election Integrity doesn't seem to be doing a whole heck of a lot. Yeah, they're talking to people about the problems they're finding, like the liberals in Massachusetts who drove up into New Hampshire and took advantage of the same-day registration to vote. Say, we just moved here. Honest, I don't have a new license. And then subsequent follow-up investigation found these people hadn't gotten New Hampshire driver's licenses. They had driven across the border, registered to vote, driven back home in Massachusetts. Our election system is a joke, and if Trump does not decisively change it, then the Democrats are going to take Congress next year, and he will be a one-term president. Now, remember yesterday, Columbus Day, everyone was talking about how Antifa was going to be out there defacing Columbus statues. It turned out not to happen. And I mention this only because I'm seeing all these dire warnings about how Antifa is going to start the Civil War and the revolution on November 4th. Well, if they can't get a crowd to show up, nothing's going to happen. So at this point, I would say that I'm not concerned about it. I'm not worried about it at all. Poor Hillary Clinton and her new book are not doing well. Over in Britain, UKIP Nigel Farage is slamming the book as a great whine. There's a story circulating around apparently that when Hillary gave Bill Clinton a copy of it to proofread, he just threw it in the trash. He got so disgusted with all the blame and the finger pointing. It's amazing. Now then, let's talk about California and the horrible, horrible fires. And I got an email from somebody that's in the area, and they're saying people around there are wondering if these fires are being deliberately set, because there's something like 19 of them now. They'll probably find an ISIS matchbook or something out there. Governor Brown has declared a state of emergency for 3 Northern California counties, and including Orange County, down in Orange County, after Canyon Fire 2 destroys 24 structures and 6,000 acres. And by the way, I saw a photo of Disneyland, or actually Disney World, with this orange sky from all the smoke from the fire in the Anaheim Hills. And that brought back a memory because when I was working at Magic Mountain, there was a day where there was literally a brush fire on 3 sides of the park, and they had to close the park. They gave everybody a rain check. As part of the street entertainers, part of our job was to get the people out of the park, back to the cars, get them on out of there, and make sure nobody was hiding behind. And it was this weird experience to stand there in the middle of this amusement park, and all the lights are running, all the machinery's running, and there's nobody there. And it just felt surrealistic in the extreme. But it is really horrible, and if you are a wine lover, you may be seeing some prices go on up, because apparently the wine country is threatened by 6 uncontained wildfires. And they have taken out some very well-known wineries, including the Frey Winery, which is famous for its non-sulfite added wines, which Claire favors for joint problems. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Lawrence in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Snugbar. Mike Rivero there. I'm going to be very brief. I have a lot of information that I have to get through. Let's start with this. Stephen Paddock owns 2 airplanes and did business with the Clinton Foundation subsidiary. His brother, I think, is air traffic controller. Now, let's focus on Steve Wynn, the guy who owned the properties.
Mm-hmm.
He started out with Mormon money back in the day. And some of his buildings were built by Halliburton, Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
When he was the biggest donor to Hillary Clinton. Now, let's fast forward to an interview that Steve Wynn did, let's see here, about a year ago on Fox Business. And he had the whole interview was about him installing high security on his properties because he was scared of, the Muslims, the terrorists.
Yes.
So let's see here. He was talking about installing metal detectors at every door entrance. He had embassy-trained Marines and SEAL Team 6, guys, which were plainclothes and had shifts every 2 hours. He did this whole thing with somebody from either FBI or Department of Homeland Security by the name of Ray Kelly, which he mentions in his current interview at Fox. Let's see here. All right.
Okay, where are you going with this? I mean, where are you going with this?
This is where I'm going with this. He specifically said that he's scared of the Muslim terrorists because of the drinking and, the illicit lifestyle, which is against the Muslims. Now, on the current interview, Steve Wynn states that Stephen Paddock, in all years of his visiting in his resort, has never drank any alcohol.
Yes.
Now, is this because he was a Mormon or because he was a convert to Islam? Now,
well, now
like,
wait a minute. Let me cut in there a little bit here because the report is that he has not been drinking for years. The claim that he converted to Islam is only from supposedly a couple of months ago. But this is all fakery anyway. I mean, go back and listen to that original police radio recording of the incident, or read the transcript. In fact, we've got a copy of it up on the website right now. The police themselves were saying there were multiple shooters in multiple locations. High on the Mandalay Bay, midway down on the Mandalay Bay, shooter in the fairgrounds themselves, which is what the Mike Adams has come up with his acoustic analysis. So we know there were multiple shooters, and Stephen Paddock was a patsy. He was set up, to just be this convenient dead body that they needed to have in order to allow the real perpetrators to escape. So anyway, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Joe in California. Joe, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Michael? I have a quick question. I'm reading a LA Times article about Nixle. It's a emergency alert system in the Napa area, and apparently 70 use cell phones to alert people of dangers and whatnot.
Yes.
70 towers were destroyed, and I think this article is alluding to maybe people didn't get the messages in time. Like they didn't really get the messages in a timely manner. My question is, would landlines be less susceptible to fire in a situation where it's coming over the valley and all that stuff?
They're probably going to be more susceptible because you've got that horizontal component as opposed, and the telephone line poles are much closer together. So I'd say probably it's more vulnerable. Now, I don't think they need special towers for this system. We have the same system here in Hawaii, and it just comes over the normal text message system. So, but yeah, if the cell system was interrupted, then yeah, these people are not getting their messages.
And just one other comment. In San Francisco, they used to have every week they would have an alarm that would sound at noon.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what day it was, but it was a remnant of the old Cold War days when it was like an alert for the whole city.
Yes,
that might work too.
Well,
anyway, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you for the phone call. Yeah, again, we have the same system here. It's tested on the first Monday of every month, and it's basically a tsunami warning system. But it does sound like the old World War II sirens. Yeah, you got a working design here. And that's what they have going here. All right, now then. And by the way, if you're in an area like that where there are fires, you don't have to rely on your cell phone to get the message. Just turn on the radio. There's going to be stations there that are designated as emergency broadcast stations that are required to have generators, so they're not going to go off the air if the power fails. And they're going to be a good source of information. Now, there's been yet another quake in Chile. It's the fourth in 36 hours. There are 9 volcanoes showing activity, and the planet is rocking and rolling. And a lot of people are saying, what the heck is going on? There was also another quake down in the Atlantic, so we don't have to worry about a tsunami here. But a lot of people are very concerned about a quake swarm over in the Canary Islands. And apparently they had 40 tremors in 48 hours. And you might want to say, well, big deal. It's a little more complicated than that, because there's this huge volcano in the Canary Islands, Cumbre Vieja, and its entire western-facing flank is literally sliding down the slope. There are huge cracks on the top part of the mountain where that entire mass has already slid something like 15 feet. And were there to be a major quake or an eruption, and were that flank to slide into the Atlantic Ocean, there would be a mega tsunami that would wreck much of the east coast of the United States. And so people have a right to be concerned about these tremors over in the Canary Islands on the Cumbre Vieja. But it does seem like the whole planet is rocking and rolling. They're talking about the quake swarms near and at Yellowstone, recent seismic activity on the Cascadia Fault. It does sort of feel like something is up, that we're in a period of increased seismicity, and a lot of people are saying, oh, it's the sun is doing it, or it's human-caused global warming. Nobody really knows. But the ring of fire is definitely ringing. And so if you're living in an earthquake-prone area, this might be a really good time to make sure your quake kit is up to date, and that you have a good plan on what you're going to do when there is a quake, because they do seem to be happening all over the place. Now, here in Hawaii, we call it the tsunami kit, but it's equally useful in an earthquake. We've only had one major quake since we moved here, and it did knock out the power for a couple of days. And one of the reasons why we don't get those here, most volcanoes basically are along the subduction zones of the great tectonic plates. But there are volcanoes that are called hotspot volcanoes, where there's just a source of heat deep inside the earth. Nobody knows what's causing it. And it just pops up a volcano. And that's what we have here in Hawaii. We are not sitting on a fault zone. We're not sitting on the edge of a tectonic plate. We're right smack dab in the middle. But we do get quakes down there on the Big Island, and occasionally they're big enough to feel up here. So let's talk about human-caused global warming here. Apparently, Denver just got hit with a major snowstorm. Somebody actually emailed me in a photo of this baseball stadium where they were trying to have a game, and it was just completely whited out. And the snow is forecast, basically ran through the weekend here. And some of the snow is being retained above 7,000 feet. And they're expecting a hard freeze with temperatures down in the low and middle 20s. Gosh darn, that human-caused global warming. And we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about human-caused global warming, which we all know is just a big, horrendous scam to get us to buy and sell carbon credits or trick us into paying carbon taxes by making us think we're destroying the world, when it's obvious the politician is destroying the world. Now, one of the areas in which they try and sort of exploit, capitalize on the fear-mongering, is selling renewable energy or alternative energy programs. And a lot of these have turned out to be complete debacles. There's the Solyndra collapse. There are the problems with the windmills, which are not lasting their expected lifespan. And they're killing a lot of birds, because birds follow those wind patterns to get from place to place easier, and they run smack into those windmills, and they get chopped up. Then there was that nonsense with ethanol in the gasoline, which ruins the fuel systems on older cars, and some newer cars literally say their warranty on the engine is voided if you use ethanol blend gasoline. And it turned out to be another boondoggle. It's not carbon neutral when you figure in the carbon emissions from processing the plant matter into the ethanol. And it carries a lot less energy than gasoline, so you have to buy and burn more of it to do the same amount of work. And it sounded really good in the soundbite, but it wasn't thought all the way through. So now we're seeing this story here. This is coming out of Breitbart, where basically, just with all the subsidies and other propping up, the reality is renewable energy has turned out to be a bigger scam than Bernie Madoff and Enron. And this is coming from Judith Sloan, who's an Australian economist who served on the Australian government's Productivity Commission. And yeah, these things don't pencil out, but they're wonderful little pork barrel projects to get government money into the hands of cronies, and they really don't work out all that well. We have a wind farm on the north part of Oahu that actually has to shut down if the wind is blowing too hard. We have another wind farm on the Big Island that's already corroding into junk, doesn't work anymore. People, despite tempting, tantalizing reports in the technical press, they still haven't found a way to make inexpensive solar cells that are much more efficient. It's just not working out. Now, I'm turning into a big fan of electric cars, especially with the announcement of that new Toshiba battery, but that electricity has to come from someplace. It has to start somewhere. It doesn't come out of thin air. And that needs to be the next part that needs to be solved before we can start moving away from an oil and petroleum-based economy. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's get some calls in here. And interesting story just now breaking. There is word out that Rand Paul has connected with Donald Trump over the issue of Julian Assange. And Julian Assange's information that proves that the DNC emails were leaked internally, not hacked by Russia. And that there is talk of a pardon, not immediately forthcoming, but there's talk of a pardon out there, which would be a really good thing. I don't know why Trump is not moving expeditiously on this. The sooner he gets that information out there, it's going to turn that DNC, Russia hacked the DNC emails into another nothing burger, and he needs to do that as quickly as he can. So let's talk about computers and computer hardware and software. As I mentioned earlier in the show, because software providers in this country are indemnified from product liability, it has created a climate of laxity in which software development is not in good shape in this country. It's too broken up. It's too corporatized. I think going the object-oriented route actually makes code harder to analyze and debug. But mostly the push is always about a new feature rather than dealing with parts of the system that don't really work. And as a result, we're seeing more and more of these problems. The new version of Skype that Microsoft insisted, you will update to this. If you don't update to the latest version, the next time you log in, it won't work. Nothing but problems. On this machine here, can't receive a phone call. It just says missed call. No way to fix that. And not just me. I went out and did a Google search about Skype problems. A lot of people are having this. I'm hearing from our control room guy that a lot of the other talk show hosts that use Skype, they're all getting these problems. Microsoft doesn't seem all that concerned about fixing any of it. They're getting sloppy. And, of course, we know about the huge problems with the software on the F-35 and the Gerald R. Ford. They don't want to fix it. It's just easier to say, oh, the Russians, they broke on in and, they introduced errors into our code when we weren't looking. So now there's an interesting issue. As you know, the Department of Homeland Security is trying to blame all of the recent problems and leaks on the Kaspersky antivirus system. And the reason they're doing that is Kaspersky is a very popular antivirus security package that is made in Russia. And it doesn't have the required backdoors and holes in it that domestically produced antivirus has. So they want you to stop using it. And they're just blaming Kaspersky for everything here. But apparently, they have discovered that over in Creech Air Force Base, this is the home of America's drone program. This is where they have all these trailers set up with cockpits in them that remotely fly the U.S. Reaper and Predator drones all over the world. Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, other war zones. And apparently they have discovered there is a mysterious virus that is inside the software of that cockpit system, meaning that somebody potentially could log in and take over control of a Reaper or Predator drone and take it someplace it's not supposed to go. And apparently whatever this virus is, it is so sophisticated they're not able to get it out of the computers. It just keeps popping up again. Now, earlier today, I saw a story on Fox News about how the government is going back to Silicon Valley and demanding that encryption in our digital devices be further weakened in the interests of national security. And so, in response to that, I reposted my article, Rivero Challenges the NSA. The point of that whole article is simply this. Laws that weaken encryption only harm the law-abiding citizens. It makes it easier for the government to steal our secrets, and they've been caught doing it. Big scandal at the Seattle Asia-Pacific Economic Conference back in the 90s. Huge scandal. And it makes it easier for the cyber criminals to steal our wealth. That's all it does. It's not going to stop a real criminal or a real terrorist, because it is very easy to create a system of encryption that, for all practical purposes, can defeat the National Security Agency. And the reason that works is very, very simple. Breaking an encrypted message is a two-step process. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. So breaking a message is a two-step process. The first part is figuring out the methodology. How does the encryption system take the clear text and the key and put them together? How does that all work? Once you have the methodology, finding the key is a matter of brute force, and it's the much easier part of the system. If you're using any codes or encryption that are out there in public, AxCrypt or any of that, the NSA already has the method, and all it takes is computer time to find the key, and the NSA has lots and lots and lots of computers. If they don't have the method, they're stuck. The NSA actually came out with this story. They were getting a quantum computer that could break any encryption ever. No. Probably find keys very fast. It can't figure out the methodology. There are simply too many possibilities. The Allies during World War II were unable to break the German Enigma code until they got their hands on an actual machine. And after that, Alan Turing and the people at Bletchley Park were able to build a little mechanical calculator. They called it the bomb because it just ticked loudly as it worked. And it could brute force the keys for the messages. And after the war was over, the U.S. and Great Britain made presents of captured German Enigma machines to friendly governments around the world without bothering to mention that they could now read all the message being sent on that. So they have to have the method. And getting on back to this article, over the course of about a year, and this was 3-4 years ago, I created 6 challenges, and not one of them was ever solved. And the NSA would have been well motivated to break at least one of these to discourage other people from going down that same path of simply saying, I can come up with my own methodology. So again, this latest push to weaken the encryption in your digital devices has nothing to do with crime and terror, and everything to do with a paranoid government wanting to watch you constantly, make it easy for themselves to spy on you, make it easy for their buddies, the cyber criminals, to steal from you. The government is totally unconcerned with whether you're being robbed or stolen from. They're completely unconcerned with the unconstitutionality of their actions. They just want to be able to watch you. They are watching everything you are doing. Schweinhund. So if you have a little coding experience, the example source code is in there. I wouldn't use it as they are, because obviously the NSA has them, but as a teaching device where you can modify it and develop your own, yeah. More concern is being raised on the so-called smart devices, on how they're basically snitching on the owners and rewriting the criminal justice system. And apparently there's a lawsuit, a court case in the legal system basically saying that crimes are being detected with data supplied by smart devices. And the courts are starting to say, yeah, this is acceptable. You can use this as evidence. So now, along with your smartphone and your tablet, spying on you all the time on behalf of the government, now so is your coffee maker and your home lighting control and the rest of it. We're talking about the Fourth and Fifth Amendments to the Constitution are literally under attack here. They absolutely are. Now, there is a team getting ready to publish a book on the untold history of Spotify, and they have been threatened by the company. Apparently, earlier this year, Rasmus Fleischer, who was also one of the early figures at the Pirate Bay, said that Spotify used pirate MP3s to launch its beta. And soon after, the researchers were contacted by a lawyer with strong suggestions to stop what they're doing. Now, remember, there was that report issued by the EU that came on out and said piracy isn't really that much of a factor. There isn't as much of it going on as everybody likes to claim that there is. But they can't see where it's really that significant a problem. It's a convenient scapegoat. I mean, you make a really bad movie and it's not making money, like Blade Runner 2049. You know, oh, my decisions as vice president in charge of fluffy things are sound and valid. We're not making money because those evil Russians and North Koreans have already stolen the movie and it's leaked out on the darknet, or some such nonsense. It's a great scapegoat, but it's not really a factor. And I'm not encouraging you to be a pirate. Frankly, these days, I'm not seeing or hearing anything that's worth the time and trouble to pirate. That's kind of how I feel about it. Now, interestingly enough, down in Antarctica, they had a huge iceberg calve off. It's the size of Delaware. That's how big it is. And it revealed a previously isolated underwater ecosystem. It's been down there for 120,000 years. And new species never seen before. It's thrived under the ice in Antarctica, but they're concerned that exposure to the modern world, modern atmosphere, might lead to the die-off of these life forms. They're that alien, so we'll see what's going to happen there. Now then, I have a couple of personal grievances I want to air here. One is the United States Post Office, which, as of late, seems to be losing a lot of mail. And we're in a quandary here in Hawaii in that a lot of stores have gone out of business, and more I'm having to buy things online from like eBay. We're going to lose the local Toys R Us, and that's like the last toy store in the immediate area. So we've already done our kitty Christmas shopping to stay ahead of that. But to give you two examples of just how bad the post office has become, I ordered a little micro SD card, and the tracking said it was delivered to my house, and it wasn't. And I had to wait a whole week before I was allowed to file a missing mail complaint at the U.S. Post Office website, which means whoever actually got this thing, probably by now they've used it, played with it, or maybe even they just threw it away. But it was gone. Another one that concerns me a little bit more. On the 18th of September, almost a month ago, we ordered some sheet music for Claire's choir. Now, we're kind of on a schedule. Certain things have to be performed on certain days. And as of today, the sheet music is still stuck at this legendary sorting station in California, which for years has had a reputation of just losing mail, and they can't seem to do anything about it. We just have to sit here and wait. This stuff was supposed to be here on the 25th of September, and here we are, October 10th, and no sign of it in progress. Now, the other thing I want to scream about is planned obsolescence, and I'm sure that probably most of you have at some point in your life seen this wonderful documentary called The Light Bulb Conspiracy, also known as Pyramids of Waste. And it talks about how in order to maximize revenue, companies deliberately design parts or devices that wear out at a certain determined point. Did you know that prior to their being banned, modern tungsten, Edison-style light bulbs, only lasted half as long as Edison's originals? Because there was literally a cartel that said all light bulbs will burn out in 1,000 hours to keep the products going. And the planned obsolescence can get a little ridiculous. I recently had to replace 2 exterior light fixtures on our home because the old fixtures used a compact fluorescent with a very unique base on it, and they just stopped making them. As of January, they said, we're not making these anymore. So when these burned out, I had to replace the fixtures as opposed to just buying a new bulb. Another thing I'm having problems with right now is our toilet. And let me preface this with another story. Many years ago, when I was living in North Hollywood, I bought an outdoor gas grill at a yard sale. And I got it at a really good price, and the guy said, the only problem is this part needs to be replaced. So, okay, no problem. I buy the gas grill, I take it home, put it on a patio. I go to a grill dealer who carries this same product line, same company, everything. And I say, I need the replacement for this part. And he said, well, we've changed all the sizes of the fittings, and that part is not available any longer. So basically what he was telling me was I had to throw out an otherwise working gas grill and buy a brand new one because they had just arbitrarily decided to change all the sizes. And I just discovered they're doing that also with the toilets. We had a component on the toilet fail over the weekend, and I went to the hardware store and I got a replacement, brought it home, wouldn't fit. And it does get very, very frustrating. All right, we're going to start taking phone calls again. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to say thank you for your show, but also I guess we just have to go with what the government tells us as far as, like, the terrorist acts that take place, you know? John Doe could end up setting off a dirty bomb, and they're going to tell us it was John Doe, and that's it, and we have to go with it.
No, we don't.
The real sad part about it, well, too many people just accept it.
I don't think as many do anymore because, again, looking back at Saddam's nuclear weapons, I think the reason we're seeing this panicked reaction to try and reinforce the official story of Las Vegas is that people aren't buying it. People are suspicious. They are skeptical, and so they're out there in the corporate media just trying to pound on this thing, and you can almost see them crying in their microphone saying there wasn't any other shooter, there wasn't any other shooter. And like I said, the police radio and its transcript, the police are saying there are multiple shooters high up in the Mandalay Bay, halfway down in the Mandalay Bay. They thought there might have even been one over on the Luxor. So there were multiple shooters, and yet they're trying to reinforce the official story. And now they're getting all upset because people are turning away from corporate media. They're coming to the independent media because they want to find out what the heck is really going on. And I can almost smell the panic in the air, inside the Beltway there in D.C.
Well, that's good to hear your interpretation of what's going on. I'm just I don't know. It's just like the Clinton email stuff. It's like everything. Time just passes, and that's it. Nothing. No, there's no prosecution for any of the crimes. It's pathetic where we're at.
It is.
And a lot of the people,
I'm going to have to put you on hold. I'm going to have to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're talking with Alex in Florida. And Alex, just pick up where you left off.
Well, I was also going to say that, they kind of act like the shooter from Vegas just had a bad day. He didn't have a bad day. It was premeditated.
It had to be to get all those guns up there. Yeah.
Yeah, someone that has a bad day has one gun and is able to kill 4 or 5 people at the most. The fact that they're saying he had a bad day and no history of mental illness, and that is a good way for our government to say we need to take guns from everybody. That's it.
That is the
agenda.
It's
a good example of why.
Yeah, I think that may have been the reason why they wanted this guy to seem so normal. Any one of you could break at any moment and be a danger to yourself and other people. That's why we have to take the guns away. Apparently, the Las Vegas cops have changed their story. They're now claiming that Paddock shot the security guard several minutes before the mass shooting. There's kind of a problem with that because that Australian gentleman in the room next door, in his story, he said the cops accidentally shot the security guard. So the story is just all over the place right now.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, I wanted to ask you another question. I heard someone say that Roger Stone was saying that he thinks that Trump has been drugged, and I kind of thought it was BS at first, but I heard him, Trump, the other day commenting on the North Korea situation.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe he has been drugged. He kind of was weird to me.
Well,
what do you think? You think there's a chance of it?
Well, to drug somebody enough to where they're going to do something they're naturally opposed to, they're going to be staggering and falling down. I imagine with the pressure that he's under, they may have him on a mild tranquilizer. And again, his change in behavior may come from the stress of the position that he's put himself in, where he's out there making stink face at North Korea and Iran and Syria and Yemen and all the rest of it. But hey, Don, you wanted the job, and now you've got it, and you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. Now, did China and Russia say that they would join in to help if we went against North Korea, where they would be on the side of the North Koreans?
China did, Russia did not.
Is there any accuracy to that?
China did, Russia did not.
Wow, that's big. I think that would deter us, but these people are ready for war. That's their only hope. To salvage this, I guess, the currency, the dollar bill, huh?
Yeah, and, Kim Jong-un and his advisors may have just decided that their best way to move forward is to just stop the nukes and the testing and wait for the U.S. economy to collapse. And, of course, I'm sure we're going to see the more belligerent elements of our government start demanding that North Korea disarm, but, of course, they're never going to do that. And again, with Trump getting ready to pull out of the Iran deal, it's sending a very unmistakable message. Don't make any deals with the U.S. government. You are an idiot if you do.
That's right. You are correct. And it's the government. The people, a lot of them are asleep, but there's some of us that are awake, and we're not the government. If we were the government, it would be a lot different than what we see today. But I guess we're just going to have to wait for the collapse. What do you think the timeline is on something like that, Michael?
I keep hearing all these dire warnings about how November is normally when corrections take place. I think everybody is again, betting the farm on a positive holiday shopping season. But the fact that Sears Canada has just quit and is starting the liquidation sale, that's sending a bad signal. Basically, as long as the Federal Reserve has those computers and printing presses, they can go on printing up money and making up whatever lies they need to make it look like the economy is functioning. But again, walk down the street of your nearby town, village, or city and take a look with fresh eyes. Look at it like you're a tourist. Look at the cracks in the pavement, the homeless, the hungry, the retail vacancies. It's very obvious this economy is not working for anybody but the money junkies. Alex, we're going to have to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back, and stay tuned. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, a few days ago, late last week, Judge Karen McDonald sentenced Rebecca Bredo to jail for refusing to vaccinate her son. And now there's another mother facing the same potential fate. Lori Matheson is now facing the same court. And I want to tell you how opposed I am to this whole idea of the government deciding what goes in your body. Because we know there are questions about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. We know that there's a link between the use of peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant and the epidemic of peanut anaphylaxis sweeping across the country. We know that there is evidence that the thimerosal, the mercury preservative in vaccines, is linked to autism. And it's rather weird because mercury in food is deemed bad by the government. Mercury in fish deemed bad by the government. Mercury in the environment deemed bad by the government. If you drop and smash a compact fluorescent bulb, there's a little tiny blob of mercury in there. Oh, you're supposed to call the hazmat people. But shoot it into the arms of children? Absolutely. Not a problem there. It's all driven by the money, forcing you to buy products you do not want, do not need, which can actually cause you harm. Remember, prior to the widespread use of vaccines, autism was almost unknown in this country. They have come onto the scene together. Clearly, there is a causal link. And until these products are proven to be safe, until we return product liability and allow people harmed by vaccines to sue the vaccine makers, the government has no business forcing us to use these on our children. Now, here's a little bit of good news. We've been talking throughout the years about various false flag stunts pulled by the FBI where they'll find some loser who's desperate for money or he's disaffected or he's mentally ill, and they'll set him up. They'll say, we're with you. The undercover informants are saying, yeah, we're going to help you do something about this. We're going to get you explosives. We're going to get you guns. We're going to get you all set up. And then they swoop in at the last second to arrest this guy for the headline value. Then a couple of months down the road, the judge realizes this is a classic case of entrapment and throws the case out. Well, apparently, one of the victims of the FBI in this is now suing the FBI for damages, saying that the FBI's campaign against him damaged his public image or what have you. And so they're suing the FBI, and I hope they win. Because it is entrapment. This is the FBI taking the shortcut to get headline news rather than actually going on out and finding real terrorists. Maybe there aren't any real terrorists. Maybe the FBI is the sole source of acts of terror in this country to keep us afraid, keep us obedient. Maybe they have to fake the terror attacks, fake the terrorists, because they can't find any real ones here. All right, let's take a phone call here. Jim in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. I was just thinking the other day that you know how the debt clock keeps spinning? I guess it's in New York.
Yes.
And just beneath it, they might put a debt clock to the Federal Reserve or the interest going to the Federal Reserve as a sort of a reminder. You know.
I would like to see that. There's a web page that has all of those calculations all being displayed, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll make a point of hunting it down and putting it on whatreallyhappened.com. But it's got total debt, private debt, government debt, rate of interest of the Federal Reserve. There's like about 20, 30 different readouts on it.
And one should say amount of money going to the infrastructure and just be a big goose egg, you know.
Probably. I mean, it's obvious now. We're in a wartime economy. The government doesn't want to admit it, but that's exactly where we are. We're in a wartime economy where the government is just, grabbing all the money it can from the American people, and they're spending it on bombs, bullets, and other weapons for the war machine, and they're neglecting the rest of the country. One of the reasons these California wildfires have gotten out of control is the budget has been cut for fire suppression, keeping those fire break roads bulldozed open. And that's what contains a wildfire when it breaks out. If you allow those to basically overgrow, then of course there's nothing to stop the fire from just racing before the wind. And that's what's going on here. We're seeing tremendous neglect in our infrastructure. The irrigation system that turned the western deserts into farmland is running at only about 30% of its design capacity. There are huge cracks and holes in the California aqueduct that are spilling perfectly good drinking water into places where it's just not needed. And so at the end of it all, there's much less water being delivered to the city, and in a lot of places in this country right now, the tap water is no longer safe to drink. So
yeah, I remember the Grace Commission report. I think it was Reagan ordered that, and it showed where the money really went, and it's just shocking to see where all the money that we send the government goes. And the interest of the debt is the primary place it ends up.
Yeah. And the government has never paid down the principal. They don't want to pay it down. They're just servicing the debt here. The reality is, if they stopped charging interest on the national debt, the American taxpayer would have paid it all off by Vietnam. It would be gone. But the whole point of the private central bank is to keep us hooked and enslaved to their artificially manufactured debt. And I say artificially because the only reason we're in debt to the Federal Reserve is they have been given the authority, supposedly, to create money out of thin air and then loan it into circulation at interest.
Yeah. Well, that's where that clock idea came into mind. It might wake some people up if they could see it just below the debt clock, where the money goes.
Well, we'd have to find out first, and every time somebody talks about auditing the Federal Reserve, they just scream and cry and say, if you try and audit us, we'll crash the economy.
Yep, they got us, don't they?
Yeah.
All right, that's all I had.
I think it would be very obvious that if the American people ever learned just how much wealth the owners of the private central bank had scammed from the American people in the last 100 years, they would definitely be heading for the tar and feathers. All right, Jim, we're going to let you go and switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
He hasn't figured it out. Yeah, well, if anybody hasn't figured it out yet, the FBI, of course, does not work for the American people.
We learned that back in the 60s with COINTELPRO.
Right, and COINTELPRO and Project Mockingbird and all that.
Mockingbird is a CIA operation.
Right, the CIA too, yeah. Hey, there was two movies I wanted to mention. One is Shooter.
Yes.
That was a 2007 Mark Wahlberg movie.
Yes.
And it basically lays out how they set up a paper trail to create a patsy.
Yes.
Actually, it was a video trail in that movie because it's a more modern version of like an old movie. But they set him up. They make him think that he's working for the good guys. And then they get all this video footage of him. And then they can set him up as a patsy, making it look like he was doing something that he wasn't doing. And then there's another movie called The International, and I can't remember what year it was. I think it was mid to late 2000s, before the turn of the decade, starring Clive Owen.
Yes.
And it actually shows a false flag assassination from a hotel window.
Yes.
And it shows they got the real shooter, and then they got another shooter that's set up to take the ball as patsy to put the blame on another group. So anyway, I thought people would find that interesting. But also, I heard an interview last night, second hour of the 3 hours of Jeff Rentz. And I just found it compelling. I thought people might want to listen to it. It's a guy, he was not there, but he has relatives, and I think he actually did know one or more people that were at the massacre. And I don't know what to make of it. I'm still on the fence about all of it, every bit of it. I have a hard time believing anything anymore. But the guy was very compelling. He said generations of family that have worked at every level of these casinos, hotels, and everything. He says the FBI is going around to the hotel rooms and to the hotel staff and all these people to get eyewitness statements, but they don't want to hear what the people have to say.
Yeah.
They're saying, no, you're wrong. And by the way, we're going to charge you with obstruction of justice unless you shut your mouth. And that, I don't know if it's true, but if that's true, I'd like to get my hands around the neck of one of these FBI agents.
Well, I've gotten a lot of emails from people who are working in Las Vegas, who actually work at the hotel, who are on the scene, and they're saying exactly the same thing. The FBI isn't really interviewing anybody. They're just looking for troublemakers. Okay? Okay, we seem to have problems with our connection, so thank you very much for the call, Frank. We're going to let you go and switch over to Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. I'm thinking this whole thing in Vegas was an attack on the freedom of assembly, for one. Number two, did that Patsy Paddock ever fly? Was he a pilot?
Yeah, he was a licensed pilot.
Somewhere.
Yeah, he's a licensed pilot. He owns 2 aircraft. Owned 2 aircraft.
Well, he owns 2. Okay. So he flew with the CIA?
Well, they're trying to say that, somebody knew somebody who was with the CIA, but they're far from saying that he was actually himself an asset. What they're trying to do is demonize this guy to destroy all possible sympathy for him so that people stop looking at the possibility that he was a patsy. And they've linked him with CIA and FBI and ISIS and Antifa and all kinds of things. By the way, some of the families of the shooting victims have already moved to freeze his estate and basically get compensation for, their pain and suffering.
I asked the newspapers, how many properties did this guy own?
I really don't know. I know that he made a big score with an apartment building that he got really, really cheap, and he built it up, and land values in Las Vegas went up during the boom time, and he sold out at the right moment. And that's where most of his money comes from.
He was not a dummy by any means.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you can't be a dummy and have a pilot's license. He basically just worked hard, and he worked for NASA, he worked for Lockheed, and he got rich, and there's no question about where the money came from, and he retired, and he liked to go to Las Vegas and play around, and that's it. That's where we are with this guy.
He could have got his rents from his apartment and took right off to Vegas.
I'm sorry, one more time?
It looks like, don't it?
What?
He could got all of his rent money from his apartments, with properties, and he just went right to Vegas after he got done with it.
Well,
he was there.
He'd sold.
They saw him. Maybe they might have saw.
No, he sold the property. He sold the property, I think.
All of them?
Well, he sold the big one back in 2015. I mean, there's no question he was at the hotel. And apparently they've now changed the story on when he checked in. Now they're saying he checked in on the 25th. So, I think they're doing that to make it more plausible that he took all these guns up to his room all by himself. But the story's changing back and forth. There shouldn't be any question when he checked on in. But again, we're being told that his registration records at the Mandalay Bay have somehow disappeared.
Uh-oh. Hey, nice talking to you, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Brian in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Long time no hear. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Hey, listen, of course, the subject of the day, and I've covered it many times in my own blog, is the Las Vegas fraud shooting, which everyone should know by now, that Stephen Paddock is, of course, a very innocent man, had nothing to do with it. The big question, of course, comes to mind about the Mandalay Bay Resort and the windows of that 32nd floor suite that he was supposedly in from the 25th of September till the night of his shooting. Now, aren't those windows equipped with sensors that just in case anybody tries to break them,
yes,
that the hotel security would be there within minutes?
Yes. There is an alarm system on the windows that will identify a broken window. I don't know if just bumping the window would do it, but certainly when the windows were shattered, security would have known instantly about it. Now, the question I think people need to be looking at is those two windows are actually in two different rooms. You have to go out into the hallway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to go out in the hallway and then in through a second door to get in there. Why would the shooter, if there's only one shooter, why does he need a second window wide open? Why is he going to be running back and forth? He would just blow the one window out and just start shooting until he ran out of ammunition. And so the mere presence of that second window, to me, is compelling proof there was at least one other shooter, along with the transcript of the police radio.
Yeah, but Michael, it also brings about all these Las Vegas press conferences with the police lying their asses off because they said that they never responded for, 30-something minutes the first time. So I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding, because the sensors alone would have identified that particular suite as being the ones with the compromised windows, so security would have known about it instantly.
Yes.
So how can they turn around and lie their asses off, pardon my language, but lie their butts off for all that time and claim that they had to search the hotel to find out which suite it was shooting from? The sensors right away tell which suite.
Yeah, plus you've got the police on the ground on the police radio who were pointing out where the shooting was taking place. They didn't have to search the whole hotel. You know, they went right up to that 32nd floor.
Absolutely. The other fact is, of course, we have this Stephen Paddock guy who's, of course, innocent. Not only is he all of a sudden the world's greatest marksman, considering he never fired a gun in his life before, according to his own family, you know, with what was it, 1,000 shots in like 10 minutes, and no brass tailings anywhere in the suite.
Well, there were only a few, but nowhere near enough. Brian, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Sorry, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently I was quite prescient with my comment about an ISIS matchbox because now, according to WorldNet Daily, California is saying that some of these wildfires appear to have been set deliberately. They match an FBI memo about a potential threat from several years ago. However, the National Terror Alert Response Center is saying at this time they're not saying the California fires are an act of terrorism. The idea being that fires would be set to cause tremendous economic damage with the loss of the forests, not to mention the wineries. So they're going to spin this into something going on. They don't want to admit that neglecting the fire control, fire breaks, has anything to do with this. It's the terrorists. They even signed an autograph. They have a selfie of ISIS setting the fires here. We've been talking about this spike of radiation, specifically ruthenium-106. It's an isotope used in cancer radiation therapy for eye tumors, and at times in radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which provide power to satellites. Now, an increase of ruthenium-106 has been detected in the air in Austria, France, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland. The half-life of ruthenium-106, it's the most stable isotope of ruthenium, 373.59 days, just about 1 year. So I have a guess, and that is that probably somebody's satellite powered by a radioisotope thermoelectric generator came down somewhere in Europe where they don't want to talk about it. certainly here in the United States of America, there's been a big hue and cry over radioisotope thermoelectric generators on civilian spacecraft. We know they're used on military craft. We used RTGs on Viking, and after that, everybody was going to be green and everything was powered with solar cells, until they realized that eventually they build up a coating of dust which renders the device unusable, which is why they finally went ahead. On Curiosity, they have an RTG as well, which keeps it going. So let's sum up today what's going on the corporate media. The news is attacking and discrediting Stephen Paddock as hard as they can and praising and defending Weinstein. And that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media. I mean, Harvey, he's a slime. He's always been a slime. And again, it looks like he's going to try and do what Bagelman did, which is get all of his powerful friends in Hollywood to rally around him and say, we don't care what he did. We don't care who he hurt. If you try and fire him or punish him, we will all quit. We'll take our business to some other studio. So, anyway, coming up here on the end of the program, nothing new on Fox News. All right, we're going to be heading on out of here real soon. But yeah, this thing about Harvey really does bother me. And now that I've got no hope of ever going back into the film industry, I feel like talking about some of the things that I saw back then. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stedman's program. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, aloha, America.